Before we begin, please note this webinar is being recorded. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on ecological drought. My name is Britt Parker, and I'm a program manager with the National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS, at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I'm also joined today by Meredith Muth from NIDIS to help with facilitation. This webinar is the fifth in a six-part webinar series that seeks to raise awareness of ecological drought, share actions that strengthen ecosystem resilience and mitigate the impacts of droughts, and highlight advancements in building tribal drought resilience and preserving natural and cultural resources. This series is co-organized and co-hosted by NIDIS and the USGS National Climate Adaptation Science Centers, or National CASC. Information shared in this webinar series will build on the 2021 National Ecological Drought webinar series, also co-organized by NIDIS and the CASC. And for more information to explore those, Meredith will be putting a series of links into the chat box as I go through this. Before we begin, I want to provide a brief overview of NIDIS and the CASC for those that are not familiar with these programs. NIDIS was created by congressional law in 2006 with a mandate to help the nation prepare for, mitigate, and respond to the effects of drought. NIDIS achieves that goal through the development of regional drought early warning systems, through efforts to improve drought monitoring, prediction, and forecasting, as well as support for effective drought planning and preparedness and assessing the impacts of drought. All of our work is done in collaboration with a wide range of partners at all levels. I encourage you to explore the U.S. Drought portal at drought.gov, which is the U.S. government's authoritative drought information website, including information on ecological drought and our work with tribal partners, as guided by our tribal engagement strategy. The Climate Adaptation Science Centers consist of 1 national and 9 regional centers that cover the United States, the U.S. Caribbean, and the U.S. affiliated Pacific Islands. The CASC brings together scientists and natural and cultural resource managers united under a common goal of helping fish, wildlife, land, water, and people adapt to a changing climate. The CASCs use an actionable science model to generate climate science and tools to help partners develop adaptation strategies that meet on-the-ground needs. Transitioning to our webinar today, since 2007, NIDIS has funded over 70 innovative and applied drought research projects through the Coping with Drought grant program. Today's webinar, Integrating Ecological Drought Considerations into Restoration Efforts and Natural Resource Management, highlights the outcomes of 3 projects which were funded in FY22. I want to before I move on, I just wanted to let you know that you can ask webinar questions. You are muted, but you can enter your questions anytime using Slido and WebEx. If you're using WebEx in the browser, click the apps button on the bottom right of your screen and type in your question and hit send. If you're using the WebEx app, please see this option. You'll see this option as Slido is in the bottom right of your screen. And so identify when possible if your speaker is for a particular, if your question's for a particular speaker. We'll try to address a couple questions after each speaker as we have time, and then after the presentation, we'll also have a Q&A. So I want to introduce our speakers now, and we'll get started. Our first presentation is entitled Building a Drought Early Warning System for Cold Water Fisheries Management Across the Northern Rocky Mountains, and will feature Tim Klein. Tim is an assistant professor at Montana State University whose research focuses on fish ecology and management, population ecology, and the application of quantitative methods to understand productivity and resilience of fish populations. Our second presentation, Connecting Ecological Drought Monitoring Tools with Natural Resource Stakeholders in Montana, will feature Sarah Church and Tanya Haig. Sarah is an associate professor of geography and planning in the Department of Earth Sciences at Montana State University and the director of the Institute on Ecosystems. Her research examines decision-making and collaborative processes related to land and water with focus on advancing social, ecological, and community resilience goals. Tanya is a research assistant professor and the social science coordinator for the National Drought Mitigation Center at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Her research focuses on adaptive capacity of natural resource managers and others to cope with drought. Our final presentation is Ecological Drought Information Communication Framework for the American Southwest. Our speaker will be Hatim Gilly, who's an associate professor of landscape hydrology at New Mexico State University with expertise in hydrology, remote sensing, and system modeling. His research focuses on modeling coupled social environmental systems for a more sustainable and resilient future. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Tim to give our first presentation.
Okay, thanks, Britt. So I'm really excited. Can you see are we all good?
Yes, we can see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really excited to share the outcomes of this, NIDIS funded research project. This story really starts about 40 years ago when a lot of states sort of switched the way they were managing fisheries from using a lot of hatchery supplementation to relying on wild produced fish to support our valuable recreational fisheries. And of course, a big question when we're relying on natural production of fish is how many are being produced and what environmental influences dictate the abundance of fish in our rivers to support these really important fisheries. So we set out to build, it's pretty obvious that water is important to fish, but we really didn't know how much water was valuable and how water actually influenced our fish abundance and fish productivity. So we set out to develop an integrated drought early warning system to understand how water and drought influences our fish populations, the mechanisms through which it does so, and by how much water influences our fisheries, and then use that information to better forecast how our fish populations are changing so that we can manage them more effectively, so that stakeholders and outfitters can use the resources and plan ahead and be prepared for river closures and fishing closures that might happen in response to drought. So a lot of the Western US is in a pretty historic drought, but it also supports world-renowned blue ribbon trout fisheries that are valued at billions of dollars a year in economic value. We've seen a big change in the amount of fishing pressure. This is data from Montana. It's approximately the number of anglers participating in fishing in Montana has doubled since 1983 when we first started collecting survey data on this. And a lot of this is coming from non-resident fishing pressure. So people coming to the state of Montana to fish are really productive and world-renowned trout fishing. And so this brings a lot of money to the state's economy. It's a recent study this year or last year valued it at $1.4 billion per year in revenue generated from people coming to Montana to fish. There's also a huge amount of demand for water in the West for various uses, for agriculture, for hydropower. And in a lot of ways, we know the value of water for agriculture. You know how much water you need to put on your fields to produce a certain tonnage of hay, and we know how valuable that hay is when sold at market. Hydropower, I'd say we know the value of that water very well in terms of how much electricity it generates and how much they're going to be able to sell that for. But then when we get to other values like ecosystem values, we don't really know what the value of water is for our fisheries. And so a big goal has been to try to quantify what does a cubic foot per second of water mean to fish production in these rivers? How many additional fish do we expect to get when we have 20 or 30 cubic feet per second of additional water? We've seen pretty persistent drought conditions over the last 30 years. So here we're looking at flow anomalies, both summer and winter flow anomalies since 1980. And really the trend is pretty clear. We're seeing a lot more red bars, which are below average stream flow anomalies, and we're seeing them in longer duration. And the frequency of wet years is has become less and less frequent over the last 30 years or so. And on the right, we have statewide changes in brown trout and rainbow trout abundance, brown trout in red, rainbow trout in green. And you can see that they track that stream flow signal pretty closely. There's a few year lag that's really important here because we don't observe fish until they're 2 years old in the rivers. They're really hard to capture when that. So about 2 years after a drought event, we start to see populations declining, or 2 years after a wet event, we'll see a population increase. So pretty big changes in our trout populations, and that's concerning to managers and to stakeholders, and of course, concerning for the economic value that they support. Montana in particular is very proactive in how they manage rivers under drought. So we have two types of closures. There are full fishing closures that are triggered if a stream falls below its 5th percentile of historical flows to protect the fish populations. And also we have what are called hoodal triggers, which when a stream exceeds a certain temperature, exacerbated by drought for more than 3 days, then we'll close fishing for the hottest parts of the day. So you can't fish in the afternoon. And so these are really proactive triggers to try to better manage our fisheries. But people need to be able to plan ahead for when rivers might be closed, especially outfitting communities who are bringing clientele from all over the world to fish in Montana and need to be able to want to be able to provide them with the experience that they're paying for. So even though this is very proactive, we have legislature around drought fisheries closures. It's still a day-to-day decision, looking at stream flow gauges, looking at temperature gauges, and whether or not we're going to exceed certain criteria that would deem a management closure. So as I mentioned, we set out to build this drought early warning system where we're integrating observation and monitoring of course, water and temperature conditions, but also rigorous monitoring of the fish populations in rivers across Montana. And then we're using that information to build models that can do prediction and forecast both trout abundance and also the likelihood of reaching certain management triggers. And this is all used, of course, to increase planning and preparedness for upcoming drought and for, within drought years, for moving clientele across the landscape, for people finding places, fishing refuges during drought where they can go fishing. And of course, to communicate how our fish populations do respond to water and changes in water in the state. So we built this. We're actually launching our web platform called Fishcast on June 1st. So this is a well-timed webinar. So this is all the information that I'm going to talk about today is available on this Fishcast platform, where you can go through all of the seasonal outlooks, the long-term forecasts, and the stream flow analyses that tell us how water drives our fish populations. So we took brown trout and rainbow trout data, so two different species from, there's 45 different populations on this map, but all listed, all these different rivers and green dots are covered within the state of Montana. Montana FWP has been monitoring the main stem rivers using mark recapture since the 70s. So we have long-term records in a lot of these rivers for how trout abundance has changed. And they're often paired with USGS stream flow gauges and water temperature. So we can really understand how historical changes in fish populations have responded to stream flow over the last 40 years. So the Fishcast tool has two components to it. First is this, the first thing I'll talk about are these management forecasts. So we have two types of fishing closures. We have hoodal restrictions, which are temperature-based time of day restrictions, and then we have full fishing closures, which are low stream flow conditions. And so we used all historical stream flow and temperature records from USGS gauges to train models to basically predict the probability of reaching the criteria that might trigger a management closure. So either that 5th percentile low flow condition or temperatures exceeding 73 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the hoodal restriction. So this model operates on a daily basis. It pulls real-time USGS stream flow gauge information and updates the forecast for 1 to 4 weeks out for the probability of reaching those management closures. So a real simple schematic, we take the current stream flow and water temperature information. This goes through a series of models, some random forest models and also logistic regression models. And then it predicts the closure probability for each of 4 weeks from 1 to 4 weeks out in the future. So that's what we're looking at here on the right. So we have in the top panel, we have the stream flow gauge in blue, from July and August. And then at some point, we're making the four-week forecast, and those are shown in the red bars. So you can see after 1 week, we have about a 50% chance of reaching that management trigger criteria. After 4 weeks, it's 75%. And then on the bottom, it shows the sort of the real outcome of what happened to stream flow in that year.
The closure forecast page provides daily
works.
predictions of low flow closures and hoot owl restrictions using real-time stream flow and temperature data from USGS monitoring stations. Each day, the system forecasts the probability of each closure occurring over the next 1 to 4 weeks. It's important to note that Fishcast only shows probabilistic forecasts. Official closures and restrictions currently in effect can only be found on the FWP website. Let's start with the map itself. Each marker represents a monitored stream reach. The markers are color-coded to show closure probability at each location. Dark red indicates that closure criteria have already been met. Orange shows probabilities above 75%, yellow between 25 to 75%, and blue less than 25. Gray markers appear when data is temporarily unavailable. By default, the map has a satellite base map, but you can switch to other options like the USGS topo maps. The left panel has a few options for changing the type of forecast shown on the map. First, you can switch between species, which include non-native salmonids, west slope cutthroat, and bull trout. Below that, you can switch between closure types. Low flow closures are triggered when stream flow drops below either the 5th percentile flow or a reach-specific threshold from a drought management plan. Hoot owl restrictions are when water temperature exceeds the species-specific threshold for 3 consecutive days. The either option shows the probability of either type occurring. The next set of buttons let you change the outlook period from 1 to 4 weeks. These periods are cumulative, so a 4-week forecast indicates the probability of closure any time over the next 4 weeks. Clicking on a station opens a detailed pop-up with the site name, stream reach, and a link to the USGS station page where you can find the raw flow and temperature data. The probability table shows the forecast for each closure type and across all 4 time periods. You'll often see probabilities increasing from the 1 to 4 week periods, reflecting the cumulative risk of closure conditions developing over time. A stream might have only small chance of closure in the next week, but that could rise to over 50% or more over the next month. Scrolling down, you'll find 2 historical charts. The first shows year-to-date stream flow compared to the low flow threshold for that location. The second chart shows daily maximum water temperature against the species-specific thermal threshold. In addition to the map, you can also get a list of closure probabilities across the stations using the closure table. You can search by site or reach name and see the current closure probabilities for species and each outlook period.
Okay, so the second part of the Fishcast works on population forecasts. So we took long-term stream flow data from USGS gauges and 40 years of market capture data to build age-structured population models in order to assess the relationship between flow and fish production in these rivers. So these population outlooks give us both a short-term forecast, a 1 to 2 year forecast, because we don't see those fish until they're 2 years old. And a lot of the life history bottlenecks are when they're much younger than that in their 1st or 2nd year. And so we can use observed stream flow conditions to forecast what we expect the trout population to look like in 1 to 2 years quite accurately. And the other thing is that once we understand how flow drives fish production, we can build rule curves to basically assess fish production and fish abundance under alternative flow scenarios. So one of the schematic here shows how the age-structured population model works. One of the big results that we found is that flow really drives juvenile fish production. It's all about the production of new individuals. And so the metric that we look at is recruits per spawner. How many offspring is each adult fish producing? And you can see in that center panel, there's a really strong relationship between how much water we have in the summer and how many juveniles are produced per adult in that year. And this is what allows us to make 1 to 2 year population forecasts. The long lead, sort of more of our planning and preparedness tool, we can build these fish production rule curves. And so to walk you through this, what we're looking at is for a population, how many trout we have today, and then how many trout we expect there to be in the next, produced from that generation in the next generation. And so each of the colored lines is showing a different flow scenario. So wetter years, 90th percentile in blue, 90th and 75th percentile. The gray is a mean flow scenario. And then we have 2 drought scenarios, moderate drought and extreme drought. In order for a population to be stable, it needs every adult needs to produce 1 copy of itself. And that's that diagonal line of replacement. So anytime the curves are above the diagonal line of replacement, we have surplus production in the population and it's likely to grow. Anytime the curve is to the right of that replacement line, we expect the population to decrease. And so there's 2 really important things we can get off of this type of curve. One is carrying capacity. So where the curves intersect the line of replacement is the expected carrying capacity under that stream flow condition. So here you can see that the carrying capacity of this river under 90th percentile is 930 trout per kilometer. But under drought or low flow scenarios, we might expect that to be almost a quarter of what the wetter condition we're seeing. So drought conditions tend to cut the abundance of trout in our rivers by about half from mean flows. The other thing that's really important is that space between the curve and the diagonal line. That's surplus production. And surplus production is super important for rebuilding populations. You need surplus to add new individuals to your population over time. It's really important for absorbing excess mortality that we might have from fishing. And it just overall increases the productivity and resilience of these populations. And so you can again notice for this system quite how strongly water moderates that surplus production. So we get a lot of surplus production in wet years and almost none under average conditions or under dry conditions.
Great. Tim, can you, we have a couple more slides. If you want to wrap up.
Sorry, yeah. I got one little video to play. This is the last one.
Cool.
The population forecast page shows predicted changes in abundance based on mean summer flow conditions. The forecasts are generated using an age-based population model that estimates the probability that a given population will increase, decrease, or remain stable. The model was developed using USGS streamflow data along with fish surveys from Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. The maps show the predicted change of each population with green indicating an expected increase in abundance, yellow indicating relatively stable, and red for expected decreases. Forecasts are available for both brown trout and rainbow trout populations, which you can switch between using the species dropdown. You can also switch between different baseline periods. By default, the map will show the forecasted change relative to the average abundance over the past 5 years. But by changing this to 1 year, we can see the expected change relative to abundance in just the previous year. So now the forecasts reflect more short-term or year-to-year variability in the population. We can also go more long-term by changing this to 10 years. And now we see the change in populations relative to the past decade. So by changing the baseline period, we can compare forecasts ranging from short-term fluctuations to long-term trends. We can get more details of a given population by clicking it on the map. At the top, we see 3 donut charts showing the probability of each outcome across the 3 forecast periods. For each period, the most likely outcome is the one with the highest probability. From these, we can see how the predictions change from short-term fluctuations to long-term trends. Scrolling down, you'll find historical time series of observed and modeled abundance in fish per mile. Each line shows the mean annual value along with confidence intervals representing 10 to 90th percentiles. The final point in the model estimates, highlighted in yellow, shows the predicted abundance given the most recent mean summer flow. The dashed horizontal line shows the mean over the entire period, while the dotted line is the mean of the last 5 years. The model accuracy is reflected by the mean concordance, with higher percentages indicating better agreement between model estimates and field observations. For this population in Big Hole at Melrose, the predicted abundance is expected to be stable relative to the previous year. However, relative to the past 5, and especially 10 years, the forecast represents a long-term decreasing trend in the population, which we can see from the time series.
Okay, I'll stop that there, but we're really excited about the information that we're making available. The public can go onto this platform and see in real time stream flow conditions, water temperature conditions related to fishing and fishing closures, and they can also understand why our trout populations might be low in response to antecedent water and stream flow conditions. So we're really hoping that this tool can help better manage water and fisheries and competing uses for water and fisheries for water in the West, and support our valuable cold water fisheries. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. We have a couple questions, but we'll save those and move straight to Sarah and Tanya. If you'd like to share your presentation, and we'll hear about your project.
Getting that going here, I think. Oh, Tim, I think you need to stop sharing. Oh, okay.
Perfect.
All right, so. Okay, so you see in my the
Yes.
slides and not the notes.
Yep. Looks great.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks, Britt, so much for the opportunity to present some of our results. I'm Sarah Church, and Tanya Hay and I will be presenting a portion of our results for this project, connecting ecological drought monitoring tools with natural resource stakeholders in Montana. All right, let's see if I can click the screen. Okay, so our project had 3 overall objectives, including developing monitoring tools, examining how traditional drought indicators represent ecological drought, and what we're mainly talking about today, understanding how tools can be used to support ecological drought management. So today we're going to be talking about our social science data, and this entailed interviews, a survey, and follow-up workshops. And each of these really fed into each other. So the interviews, what we learned from there, fed into some of the questions we asked in the survey. And then interview and survey data really informed details of more things that we wanted to jump into to get more details in the workshops. So today we're going to report on a portion of what we learned from survey data. One of those being, did management change after Montana's 2021-2022 drought? And then we'll report out on some of our workshop data where we explored barriers to management change and also a new potential drought monitoring tool. So Tanya, I'm going to hand it to you to talk about some survey results.
Sound good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, super. Great. I apologize at the outset. I'm on Wi-Fi at a hotel at a conference, and I have a little delay. So I may have a delay, Sarah, when I see the slides.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about some survey, actually, and interview data related to this question of how do natural resources managers use drought monitoring data? How are they managing drought, and what types of information do they want to see? And this is a nice follow-up, I think, to Tim's presentation, because in this project, we really focused on terrestrial systems. So a lot of the folks in the survey were grassland managers, they were forest managers, and of course there are water bodies in all of those systems, but we were really focused on the terrestrial part of the system. So in the survey, the reason that we focused on the 2021-22 drought in Montana to understand how natural resource managers were using monitoring information during that drought is, as you can see in this slide of the U.S. Drought Monitor, this was a significant drought event for Montana, and had just recently come out of another significant drought event earlier, but the 2021-22 drought gave us the opportunity to have sort of this focusing event that we could ask folks about. So go ahead to the next slide. So we were really interested in how did natural resource managers, including, again, people who are working with public lands and forest management, who are working with grassland management, some nonprofit or some NGOs also working in ecological land management, how did they experience that drought? How were they using monitoring information, and what kind of management changes did they make? So I'm not going to spend too long on what were the impacts that people reported. I think Sarah's going to talk a little bit more about this later. But just again, that it was an impactful drought in both forests and grassland ecosystems. Managers reported both direct and indirect impacts. They reported seeing impacts in 2021 when the drought began, but also some that didn't show up until 2022 or even 2023. And folks also were reporting some ecological shifts that were happening during that drought. And we have one quote that came out of the survey related to wildfire, reburning, and old burn scars, which had shifted from forest to a more open grass and shrub. Go ahead, Sarah, if you want to go to the next slide. So again, this was an impactful drought. It's a space where we would expect natural resources managers to be needing and using drought monitoring data. And we were really just interested in how. So on this slide, you can see overall, I guess one statistics we didn't have on here. So we asked managers whether or not they used drought monitoring data in their management during that drought. And about 50% of managers overall said that they did use drought monitoring information. And then we wanted to dig a little deeper into what does that actually mean, because we think in many cases there's not really an exploration of how information is being used, and it doesn't necessarily limit use to just using information and directly making a decision. So if you're able to see the labels across the bar graph, you can see people reporting that they used information really to increase their general awareness about the situation, that they were using information to compare with on-the-ground conditions, so what they were seeing on the ground. They were using data to develop strategy for how they were managing during the drought. They were using data in how they implemented their management strategies. Some reported that they were using data to request resources or to communicate with the public. And then some were using it, the least number, but still important, were using it to identify places where further monitoring needed to be done. And Sarah, if you want to go ahead to the next slide. So what this data was really telling us was that when we're developing drought monitoring data for natural resources managers, we really should probably be thinking of this whole range of potential uses. And within that range, that probably means that the kinds of data and also how they would like the data to be interactable with, it needs to be tailored to each of these uses. But then one big question we had was that direct information use into a change of management of a parcel. So something we would call like a direct decision making. And we asked whether management changed on the parcel of land that they managed, changed during the 2021-2022 drought. And we saw that 48% of managers reported that they did change management. Interestingly, all of those folks were working in grassland management. And I think for those of you who work in grassland management, you can imagine what those changes were. But none of the forest managers in our survey reported any change in management during the 2021-22 drought. So we thought that was really interesting. And so Sarah, if you want to go to the next slide. that sent us back into using not only the survey results, but going back into some of the results of the interviews that our team had done with natural resources managers to dig a little more into forest drought management and to kind of get a sense of how do forest managers frame drought management. And I'm sorry, I don't think I mentioned this on the other slide, but at the bottom of this slide, you can see that we do have a paper in review on framing forest ecosystem drought management in Montana. I'm not going to go through all of these because I don't think we probably have time for that, but we found a lot of complexity with multiple goals, a lot of complexity in how drought fits into management goals in forests, a lot of complexity in ecological processes and historical management that are really making drought management really a complex thing in forest management. So that was something that we felt like we wanted to dig a little further into, and I think that maybe leads us into the focus group. So I'll turn it back over to you, Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, and so from the interview and survey results, it really showed us where we should delve more into these focus group workshops. And one of the issues we wanted to understand was surrounding that management change or lack of management change, especially with forest managers. So now we're going to delve into some of our workshop results, but I'm going to step back for a second. So the first activity that we did with the workshops was to explore more about the impacts of that 21-22 drought. And so through a timeline exercise and discussions, we asked participants what ecological drought impacts had since emerged since 2023. And overall, we found that drought conditions can impair ecosystem management efforts and undermine efficacy of management practices. And all of that contributes to additional impacts like wildfire and forest health. And so some of the issues we heard related to forest landscapes included low snowpack and a lack of frozen ground can impair logging and fuels reduction activities in the winter. Prolonged drought is a challenge for prescribed burns, and forests have variable capacity to cope with drought due to reliance on groundwater. And so all this complexity feeds into barriers to management change. And so when we asked about what inhibits changes to management after prolonged drought, we found a variety of issues are barriers. This included, you can see this list here, but economic constraints, constraints of the landscapes themselves, and importantly, constraints around legal policy and regulations, which also can be related to management goals. So what we heard from our workshop participants is that management change was a challenge if it didn't follow mandates or plans. Another thing we heard is that there might be too much information to weed through in terms of drought planning and management, and much of that information they felt was inaccessible. And so this is just another part of our project, the OpenET 30-meter resolution evapotranspiration tool. One of the questions we had is whether this tool might help inform drought management decision-making. So this is an online mapping tool that shows ET, which can be used as a proxy for vegetation health. And it's important to note at the time of our workshops, the 30-meter resolution data was only available for small areas at a daily lag. Statewide data was available at longer lag times. Jason Otkin provided a great demonstration of the tool, and then we asked a series of questions you can see here. But overall, we just wanted to know if OpenET might be useful and how participants might use it. And we found that our workshop participants thought getting lower resolution data quickly was more important than spatial resolution. But we had some really great conversations about using the tool retrospectively to evaluate the efficacy of management strategies, and then also to communicate the results of strategies and practices. And then just importantly related to this particular tool was seen possibly as more useful at small scales rather than a statewide scale. And just to note, I mean, this came up quite a lot because many of our participants were working at the statewide scale. But, you know, they had local small scale projects as well. So I'm just going to end here by showing a few of the key takeaways from the whole project. We just provided a small snapshot of what we learned, but two that I want to highlight is that we found natural resource managers have a need for better data and tools that are accessible. And also through much of Dr. Sale Rhodes' research, we found that combining scientific data with local knowledge can contribute to better planning, more informed decision making, and stronger resilience to future droughts. Thank you. Let's see.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We'll move into our third presentation from Hatim, and then we'll try to get to some of the questions I'm seeing coming in.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
All right, let me put in a presentation mode and we get started. All right, thank you for this opportunity to present some of our findings in this project that is funded by NIDIS. So it's about communicating drought information. I think it's mainly focused on New Mexico, as you will see. But the tool is actually puts a framework that can be used as anywhere if we are able to present it in a good way that is easily understandable. So thanks for the previous speakers. I don't need to speak much about ecological drought, but within this context, we're looking at drought impacts over rangeland or natural vegetation where the land is used mostly for rangeland livestock production. And that has a lot of impacts on the stakeholders in New Mexico and elsewhere in the Southwest. So what type of information that we're thinking to provide, it should be in a way that can help. And then I'm going to keep using the word stakeholders, but it includes many groups that helps these groups in mitigating or adapting or both to drought conditions, to ecological drought conditions. So the question that we raised within our team, how can we effectively and efficiently communicate ecological drought information to stakeholders? So we started thinking or simplifying the way that we want to share information into a very simple approach, making it consistent of three. We have data or not, and then we have to integrate this data in a meaningful way, and then we have to share it with or disseminate it with the stakeholders. And then when we started to looking at what's available in terms of entities that provide drought information, we have this is spaghetti looking diagram that shows how we envision our project. So we have our project in the middle, but we have to access or get in touch with all of these entities, and we tried to get information, and then we integrate them together, and then we disseminate them, as you can see, through some sort of web-based tools. So the three, I would say, components which integrating, developing, and disseminating drought information. But this got us thinking, this is more like a top-down approach that we, as if we already know what stakeholders need. But when we started to think about the needs, actually, we ended up looking, okay, it's better to do it bottom-up approach, because what's available might not serve, what's currently available in the current format might not serve the needs of the stakeholders. So, so conceptually, we have this as a co-production knowledge, talking to stakeholders and see, okay, they may know or not there is drought information that can be used, and if not, we have to develop new ones. And so this is a diagram that shows, and I don't expect you to read all of these details or see all of them. So we have different sets of data from different sources, whether it's remote sensing or text or basically some of images or citizen science. We integrate them in a way that should be spatially and temporally consistent, so we can actually extract retrospectively what happened in the past, learn from it, and then uh, share what we've seen in the past, whether there is a natural adaptation on the ground or what actually happened in the natural cover. So the CBUS integration, that's the step that needs a lot of time to distill the information at the county scale. So we are, yes, we're looking at New Mexico, but based on feedback from stakeholders, it's more useful at the county scale. Even the county scale, sometimes you have the drought conditions vary within a county, but if we go narrower, then we lose some sort of information. Aggregating it makes it a little bit more easily to get more data. So the way we wanted to present it, we actually archive, or let's say that we have historic data, we organize it and create, we call this summary reports, basically at the county level. And then additional, so what we're gonna talk about today, two findings. What you see here as we're integrating data that happened for drought condition that happened in the past, which is good and it's helpful. But one of the needs, actually, what do you do if you know there is a drought going to happen, or do you actually know there is a drought going to happen in the next few months or weeks? What do you do with this information? It's not that, yes, there is a drought, but can you manage or see what happened, what people did in the past, and do similar or not? So one of the things that we found is missing, actually, what are the drought impacts that happened during different drought conditions, and can we actually predict those? These are more useful to stakeholders. They expect that, they say there is a shortage in water supply, or there is the cover production would be limited at some point. So we, in this sense, we looked at providing short-term forecast of drought impacts up to 8 weeks, and I will present it in the next slide. But this is how we envisioned it. We looked at the way we designed the experiment, or the model that we did, is confined ourselves to 8 weeks, assuming that, and we can test this assumption again, that 8 weeks is enough to actually identify the different drought impacts that you see here on the screen. These are based on the drought impact reporter. Not all of them we were able to provide short-term forecast, but appears that if you look at the total number of impacts since 2005, they actually seem very much correlated to with the drought conditions based on the DSCI. So we use this knowledge and kicked it off by looking at individual impacts. So when we developed this kind of framework of drought impact forecasting tool, this is just a description of what we try to do. We have the set of machine learning tools, and we have drought impacts categories. And here we use only two drought monitoring tools, the DSCI and ESI, evaporative stress index, for legitimate reasons. Basically, we were looking at weekly conditions. So I will jump into some results that we have. So what you see here is drought impact forecast based on prior 8 weeks of historic data, weekly data, and we kind of looked at how the models perform over. These are typically 6 types of impacts. So the more data you have, you get more accuracy in predicting the impacts. So, and as you go far or back, for example, I'm explaining one of them here. So 1/8 means that we have past 8 weeks of data we've used to predict agriculture impacts for the next week. So if we have this week and past 8 weeks, and then we can predict the impacts next week. The way we framed it, that yes, we don't want to predict next week. It's a short period of time for people actually to respond. We wanted to look at longer uh, time period for forecasting, so up to 8 weeks. If we can do that, then that would be maybe giving more people more time to respond. So that's why we have going back to 8 weeks. So if we say we use 2 weeks or 6 weeks past data, we can get an accuracy of 0.9 of that particular type of impact. What we found so far here, actually, not all of these, I think this is many of you may know, not all of these indices well performed over the different impacts. And also we use a couple of machine learning tools. Only one of them actually managed to do well. And then not all of them did also similarly well across all impacts. The impacts you see here are the one actually they were fine in terms of, or acceptable in terms of their accuracy. The other ones like energy, tourism, they were not actually represented because of the limited data. So this is a figure I always get confused with. Basically, I'm trying to explain more what we get in terms of 8 weeks ahead in forecast. So I will just mention this bottom figure here. So the dashed line is basically the reported impacts, and the colors, the colored lines are actually the range of forecast based on different set of prior weeks, because we want to see which set of data actually is providing more useful information to predict the total impacts. This is at the state level, and we're predicting the total number of impacts. And you can see here actually we are either overestimating the total number of impacts, or underestimating in the closer in the short term, like 4 weeks. After that, we are underestimating in general. So I think it's a good start to use for now, or actually to start improving it. And the spatial representation of this forecast is shown here. So for the state, we just looked at the number, but here we have the spatial, how actually the impacts are distributed. So we provided forecasts for the week of June 24, and we looked at how the observed impacts were. So it seems that also there is some differences, but we captured a few of them, not entirely similar. And we have many actually good reasons of why we're missing some areas. For example, the southeast part of New Mexico for that particular week. So we're giving these two as mainly as an example for our forecast. So there is an output. There is a paper actually in the second round of review. You will be able to see these findings. So going back to the main objective, which is the dissemination part, and how we developed our weekly summary reports. So we use large language models, and this is a description. You don't have to read all of these details, but basically we looked at all available, not all actually, we looked at only 5 sources of drought information for a specific week or weeks of times. So we actually disaggregated the data into weeks. The large language models, because the data is just in very different forms and formats, we actually looked at how the text actually is presenting it. There's a lot of incomplete information, a lot of missing actually language about describing the drought. So we actually organized it in a weekly format, but also linguistically rearranged the data, and we present it in a weekly format. So as an example, so this is a website is not active. You can access it, but it's for only a closed group. But it provides the prior week's information about drought condition. It app, it shows by Monday, each Monday. So it's working for us internally. Each Monday we run the same large language models and provide these summaries. It was difficult in the beginning because there isn't any standard drought information that you can actually say, okay, this is accurate, and you can compare your your summaries with, uh, uh, because of the fact that there are different sources, and each one of these sources actually has a specific objective. It's not necessary for ecological drought or for a specific region. So we have to we created our own standard data, which actually was manually verified. We looked at 1 year of data for each week, and we manually actually verified it, and we saved that, and we run our models. So as you can see here, we tested 3 models, but the Gemini by Google actually performed better in this case. I will stop here, and let me know if you have any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Hatim. I know we're very close to the top of the hour. If you did ask a question and we don't get to it, I will connect you with the speaker. But let's just have maybe 1 or 2 questions for Tim. The first question, Tim, is how compatible is Fishcast with mobile use?
Yeah, so the website renders and works pretty well on phones and tablets, so mobile devices. We are having discussions about making a formal app that is just to the accessibility of getting the forecast rather than having to go to a web browser is a little easier.
Great, thank you. And one question for Sarah and Tanya. Could you talk more about the concerns expressed by participants regarding the volume and amount and inaccessibility of information? Do you know what types of information was more or less relevant for the types of decisions that your focus group participants were making around drought planning or monitoring?
Tanya, do you remember that off the top of your head? Or Sale? They dug into the data more than I did.
I'm saying I think that was a little bit more in the focus groups.
Yeah. I mean, I think overall what we hear a lot is that there's an overwhelming number of tools, and that some people don't even know they exist, but there's just a lot out there, and it's hard to navigate what is useful. And one of the tools they didn't know about was Montana has their own drought monitoring tool that is incorporating local knowledge. So that was one finding that we were going to work on, just building awareness around that particular tool in Montana.
Great, thank you so much. Can we have the next slide? We have one more webinar in this series of ecological drought webinars, which is going to focus on improved monitoring and informing, drought dashboards to inform, I cannot speak, improve monitoring, inform tribal resilience, and preserve ecological and cultural resources. So that will be our last webinar on May 26th. And as you exit, you will be asked to fill out a very brief survey about this webinar, and we would really appreciate your feedback as we work to improve webinars in the future. So thank you for spending time with us today. If your question wasn't asked, I will definitely connect you with speakers and try to get some answers to those questions. So thank you very much and take care.